Welcome everyone, and good evening on this lovely evening. Welcome to the Lichfield District Planning Committee meeting on the 30th of June 2025. This is a publicly broadcast meeting that is streamed live via our website and available on YouTube. I'd ask therefore that you conduct yourselves in an appropriate manner. I welcome those present in the public seating area and ask that you be respectful to the committee members, its officers, as well as those speaking. I ask that you remain seated and quiet during the procedures. Thank you. My name is Councillor Chetland and I'm Chair of Lichfield's Planning Committee. In a moment, I'll ask everybody participating in the meeting to introduce themselves so you know who they are. Before doing so, can I remind everyone in the meeting, please ensure that your mobile and electronic devices are switched off or are muted throughout the session. For those who have registered to speak, please ensure that your content is relevant to the material to the debate in hand and that you are mindful of the allotted speaking times. If you go over this time, you will be asked to stop immediately. When speaking, for the particular benefit of those following from home, as well as for those in the room, so that they can see and hear you clearly, can you speak in a pronounced manner? Planning Committee is a non-political, quasi-judicial committee bound by the National Planning Policy Framework, Lichfield's local plan and supplementary planning guidance. Our decisions are informed by planning considerations tied to these policies. But it is not a pure science. We must weigh up the benefit and harm when coming to a view. The arrangements for conducting this meeting will be as follows. Officers will introduce each application. Any members of the public or applicants and agents or councillors who have registered to speak will then be invited to address the committee. Members are reminded to keep their questions to the point and on matters of clarification for planning purposes only. Technical questions or clarifications of details of the application will generally be directed. Committee members will then discuss and decide on the officer's recommendations on each application. May I also clear that we cannot receive questions or comments from anyone in the public seating area. Please be assured that the committee will aim to thoroughly question and consider all matters before it in coming to a decision. When we come to vote on each application, I will initially ask all members to confirm to approve the recommendations in the report by raising their hand. I will then ask for those of you voting against the recommendation or abstaining to confirm the specific planning reasons you are doing so. In the event of the vote being carried against the officer's recommendation, I will ask officers to comment on the viability of the planning reasons as to why the objections or what's been voted down. And if recommended by officers, we'll ask members to vote again on whether to defer the item for further report for those reasons. If for any reason a member is not present for the whole of an item, they will be asked not to vote on that application. I will now ask members and then officers participating to introduce themselves. I'll start with my Vice Chair.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Derek Cross.
Good evening, Councillor Joe Powell.
Good evening, Councillor Matthew Wallins.
Good evening, Councillor Mears.
Good evening, Councillor David Salter.
Sorry, Councillor Rosie Harvey-Coggins.
Councillor Hugh Ashton.
Councillor Anne Hughes.
Councillor Day Evans.
Councillor Michael Galvin.
Councillor Andrew Rushton.
Jay Nankapel.
Claire Saint, Senior Planning Officer.
There are 4 Principal Planning Officer.
Mark Thaworth, Legal Advisor.
Kerry Challoner, Development Management Manager.
Nay Cartwright, Governance Officer.
And Christine Lewis, Elections and Democratic Manager.
Thank you very much. Okay, first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I believe we received apologies from Councillor Marshall. And looking around, everyone else is here. Declarations of interest. I'm going to declare the first one on the papers that were put out to you on application 25/00533/FULM. That application is in reference to a bowling green at Lichfield Sports Club. I'm chair of Lichfield Sports Club, and as such, this is being brought to the meeting on that basis, and Councillor Cross will chair that part of the meeting. Any other declarations of interest, please? Councillor Powell?
Yes, item 25/00617/FUL. I'm the ward councillor and I'm aware of both parties, objectors and applicants.
Thank you. Councillor Mears?
Just looking for the planning reference for the application for Hammerwich for the battery storage. I own property in Hammerwich, so in that respect, I'd like to declare an interest.
Application 24/01169/FULM.
Thank you.
Councillor Salter?
Thank you, Chair. Just to declare that I am chairman of Shenstone Parish Council, the parish ward that's 25/00617, if you will, within.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton?
25/00579/FUL. I'm the City Council representative of the Friends of Lichfield Historic Parks.
Other declarations? Thank you. Minutes for the previous meeting, not the longest meeting we've ever held. Any comment? Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. It's not the minutes exactly, but I need to correct the public record of the meeting and apologise to Councillor Cross for my temerity in disagreeing with him about whether the premises that we discussed were occupied or not. He goes round looking carefully in town. I go around with my head in the clouds, and I will try not to disagree with him on matters of fact in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Are we all okay to approve those minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to planning applications, just to note, because there are people here to speak on items 1 and 3, and no one to speak on item 2, we've adjusted the order. So we're going to do item 1 first, which is 24/01169/FULM, and West of Lionsden first, and then we will move on to the nursery in Streetley second, then it'll be the bowling green, and last it'll be the golf course. Okay. If I can ask Gareth Paul to present for the first one, please.
Yeah, so this is the application for the development of a battery energy storage system with ancillary infrastructure, security fence, access, landscaping, and biodiversity enhancements. I tried to keep it quite short because we got quite a bit on the agenda today. There was an addendum which I understand came across earlier today. I wasn't sure at one stage whether it was going to get across. It got jammed up in the process, so I kind of put everything into the start of these slides to go through it if I need to. I'll just sort of sail through it, and then if you want to come back to anything at any point, I can go back to it rather than labour everyone with it now. But essentially, the changes made where I updated the report in 2 sections, just to confirm with the grey belt review, this was undertaken by officers as part of an assessment of this application, not as a grey belt review of a strategic grey belt review as part of the green belt review of the plan area. And then also clarification that when I refer to golden rules, also discussing green belt, that relates to housing, which is why the report says it's irrelevant in this case. There was a condition updated fire safety report, that's to include the M6 toll as a consultee in that condition. And then 2 new conditions were added in black. And then again, I had on top of what did come out earlier, a verbal update, which is a further condition. If I fly through, like I say, these are bits that I can go back to if anyone has any questions on those elements. But essentially, we added 3 new conditions. So that first one is a road restraint risk assessment process. Good acronym, which was added in consultation with M6 toll. I've sent that across to them. We were wondering whether maybe they would review their objection subject to that condition, but I haven't heard back from them yet today, unfortunately. But essentially, that's a process that they'll look at how the road works, and essentially it looks at whether we need to put in any kind of protection barriers prior to the commencement of this application. In addition to that, you'll see in the paper there was a condition to limit the connection to 100 megawatts, and also a condition requiring that secondary fire access route to be maintained and kept open at all times. So onto the application. I'll go through everything, and then if I'm sure there'll be questions, happy to flip back and forth as needed. I've got a few additional slides that might be needed. Questions. Site itself is located on the red dot you can see there, about 700 meters from Brown Hills, 1.3 kilometers from Burntwood. It's within the green belt. It has a public right of way running through it, and the land is grade 3B, which is moderate quality agricultural lands. If you zoom into the site, great in this lighting. If you zoom into the site, so the site is ringed there in red, and then mouse sharp. And then you can see that at the bottom here you have the A5 running along that side. Then coming up from the bottom middle of the map through to the top left is the M6 toll. And then this line running across the top of the red line site is the disused national rail line. Some views of the site. So that's a view from the north near Mirash Farm. A view from the northeast. You can't see the site in these. It would be behind the land levels, as mentioned in the report, from the public right of way above the rail line. This is a good view, but obviously is very dark on the screen from the public right of way below the rail line. So that's where the access track would be going through into the site. And one final view from adjacent to the A5, looking across the M6 toll towards the site. And can't quite see it there, but the M6 toll would be there sitting near the sort of bottom of that red arrow that runs through, and then the site would be just to the right of that on the other side of the M6 toll road. So going through to the actual proposal, the access would be off Lionsden, would then come through the site as you see there, and then that new pathway would put in through the site, running alongside the national rail line through to the main area of the site where the development would be. The green line in the left is the secondary fire access route. So that's if the main grey route going across the north is ever unusable, they have that secondary route coming through so that emergency vehicles could get there if ever needed. The proposal itself is contained within majority of these grey buildings down. Sorry, this mouse is very difficult. Down in sort of southwest area of the main portion of the site. And that's for a 50-year temporary consent for a 100 megawatt connection of battery energy storage. Essentially how this would connect to the grid is they'd run an underground connection adjacent to where the access path is, which would then run to the public highway. And at that point, there is an existing connection which takes that power, the remaining 3.6 kilometers with substation. Looking at the details, so there's 48 BESS containers, 33 inverter containers. This is the main bulk of the site, which are those rectangles you can see there. There's an indicative image of what they look like at the bottom. Basically 40 meters length, 3 meters height, and 2.5 meters in width. The application also has, I won't bother with this mouse, but essentially there's planting along that southwestern boundary onto the M6 toll. Tree planting on site, you can see by those green circular trees, and there's the blue snaky line to the top left is a swale, and then there's an attenuation basin down in the southeast of the site to help with flooding, but also biodiversity. The area ringed in red there is the substation area, so that houses the roughly 6 meter maximum height transistor and transformer, and various other elements. And also the communication tower at 16 meters in height, which isn't on the plans as discussed in the report. And that's why conditions being recommended to secure details of that, although we do have general dimensions of it. So that was factored into the landscape and view and impact assessment and the general assessment of the application. That's just showing green belt. I'll come back to this. I spoke to a few people beforehand, and it sounds like it might be helpful to run through the grey belt process at the end of this. So I'll keep flying through now and then come back to this in a second. But essentially, they're building on a 1.4 hectare area of greenbelt. what's shown on there is Greenbelt, and you can see the areas of non-Greenbelt there. And if it's helpful, I'll come back to this when we're talking about, sprawl and connecting up towns and things like that. I think the next one will be interesting. There you go. So in this one, if you see that sort of fairly central BA5, that's the portion of Greenbelt that we're in. So when I'm referring to the section of Greenbelt, we're in that BA5, which is 535 hectares itself. So even within that small portion, our site is, I think it's 0.25% of.
I appreciate your mouse doesn't work very well, but if you
Yeah.
mouse the point, because I can't see.
You know what?
With or without my glasses.
Potentially this is easier. Sorry,
Sure, people at the back.
This area there.
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking of a different point. Yeah, that's
Apologies. So again, if there's any questions, throw them across, and I've got some additional slides if potentially needed. But wrapping it up from the report, you'll see that we identified 2 conflicts with the development plan. One of them was the loss of the agricultural land. And again, in terms of mitigating circumstances, only a portion of the site being built on. It's temporary impact, albeit 50 years. It's a long period of time, but it is temporary. So, it can be returned to agricultural land in the future. It's moderate quality land, so it's not best and most versatile land, which these applications are basically directed away from. Wouldn't significantly impact on the supply of land. I was mentioning earlier, I couldn't see what the supply of land is, but if there's 33,000-ish hectares in the plan area, there's not that much urban build up, then you've got to assume this is a fairly small portion of that. Also, looking at our historical mapping, it looks like this area that they're building on, proposing to build on, hasn't been used for agriculture for some time. Maybe some horse grazing, but it doesn't look like it's been actually farmed or any crops on it since at least 2006. Could potentially be a lot sooner. So that was one negative, and the other one was the minor impact on landscape and landscape views. Obviously, there's a localized within the site, as I've said in the report, there are trees around the site, there are raised areas, and it sort of sits within that backdrop of the M6 toll road. So that's why we considered it a minor impact there. And it's, I think, to add as well, I mean, the main views where you would be viewing it are from the A5, so there's sort of fleeting glimpses, and particularly when all the trees are in leaf, it'll barely be visible. So we're weighing this against the public benefits, as mentioned earlier by the chair, in terms of the planning balance. So those are the negatives that officers have identified. And in terms of the main benefits, I've listed a few here. So the main one, which has been very much highlighted in the slew of appeals that have been coming in recently on these sites, is not to undervalue the contribution towards national energy storage. So I mentioned in the report, at the moment we have, I think it's 4.5 gigawatts of storage, and basically to try and hit the net zero, legally binding net zero targets by 2030, we need to basically triple that. So it's a very key bit of infrastructure. Net zero, climate change, obviously improves energy flexibility, particularly with renewable energy when it's not a windy day. We need somewhere to store, or if it's a windy day and there's no energy requirement, we need somewhere to store that energy. Also then at times, for example, at night where solar panels aren't currently generating, we need somewhere for that stored energy to come back out. Also benefits are 56% biodiversity net gain, which is far in excess of the mandatory 10%, and then the job creation during construction operation. Although, as noted in the report, I think I gave that moderate weight only because it's not the most amount of working jobs. Anyway, officers balance this up and then have recommended the application for approval subject to the conditions in the report. Is it worth me quickly running through Greybelt?
I think it is.
Yeah. Okay. It would be it'd probably be easiest if you turn to, should have had this up, 10.15 ish. Yeah, or if you so if you go to like sort of 10.10 basically. And then if I sort of take us through it, because I appreciate it's quite new, well, it is a new concept in planning throughout the country. Okay, yeah, okay, brilliant. So basically, there was maybe a misunderstanding. I think particularly in the executive summary I wrote, maybe it could have been clearer. At no point was I saying that we've done, like I said earlier, a greenbelt review, and in that identified grey belt sites and then strategically allocated those sites as grey belt. That hasn't happened. It will happen, but not yet. But much the same as other elements in planning, we still have to look at that in an application, each application. So something comes in the grey belt, pretty much everything should have that assessment of, in the green belt, everything should have that assessment of, is it grey belt before you go down the path of assessing the green belt harm? A lot of them will probably come back as no, some will come back as yes. So that's what I've done in this report, and that's where the conclusion it's grey belt came from. But basically how it works is basically a three-step process. I try to simplify there. So sort of a three-trigger process. So the first one is, does it qualify as previously developed land, PDL? I put in a description of the NPPF glossary description of previously developed land. No need to go through it, but no, it's not. We're not saying it's previously developed land. So it sort of essentially fails on that point. The second point is then with the application of policies related in footnote 7, which is within paragraph 11 of the NPPF, would they give a strong reason for refusal of the scheme? And none of those would apply. They are noted somewhere. But basically, give me 2 seconds. Thank you very much. So yeah, so it would be habitat sites, doesn't apply. Sites of special scientific interest, doesn't apply. Land designated as greenbelt, which obviously does apply, but a new footnote was put in, a new part of this footnote, which basically takes that out when we're looking at grey belt, because obviously otherwise everything would fall down. So that one doesn't apply. Local green space, national landscape, national park, heritage coast, irreplaceable habitats, designated heritage assets, archaeological interest, areas at risk of flooding or coastal change. So none of those put none of those forward as a reason for refusal. And also the NPPF was updated earlier this year to change it from a reason for refusal to a strong reason for refusal. So not only to sort of take this out of potentially being grey belt in that part 2, you not only need a reason for refusal on one of those, but it has to be a strong reason for refusal as well. So we're saying it complies with that. And then the final bit is this, does it make a strong contribution in terms of NPPF paragraph 143? And again, this is all stuff that has come down from the national level. So it's, I guess we can interpret within it, but we can't interpret how it's telling us to interpret, if that makes sense. So basically it says when you're looking at whether it's grey belt, you look at purposes A, B and D. And these are the sort of 3 of the 5 purposes of how you assess whether land within the green belt makes a strong contribution to that green belt. So if you look underneath 10.15, I won't labour this, but so I've gone through purpose A, B, and D. I know there was a lot of different sections, and then we have to bounce back out and look at A, E. But basically, you go through each one, and so purpose A is checking the unrestricted. Actually, it would make sense if I go back to this one. So purpose A is checking the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. So Hammerwich can't be included in this. Again, it's very clear in national policy that it's a village; it shouldn't be taken into account. So you're basically looking at whether this contributes to sprawl between large built-up areas, which I guess would be Burnwood and Brown Hills mainly. And then also the planning practice guidance gives us a kind of indication of what only if it strongly contributes to this, are we sort of saying that there might be an issue. And it gives us an idea, which would be being adjacent or near to a large built-up area, resulting in an incongruous pattern of development. So bearing in mind, we've got the red line site there, and obviously it's only the kind of, the half or third of that triangular area to the southwest. In the report, I've said that doesn't take place. The second one is preventing neighbouring towns merging into each other. So again, we're looking at towns, not villages. And like I said, the PPG says, it's likely to contribute strongly, aka we might fail to the sort of grey belt test if the application forms a substantial part of a gap between towns, or development which would be likely to result in the loss of visual separation to towns. So here, we've got some elements up at 6 meters. There's the thin tower at 16 meters, but most of it's up at 3 meters in a depression, trees on either side. I concluded in my report that it's not for substantial, filling in a substantial gap between towns. So I've said again, that sort of passes that one. And then the final one is preserve the setting and special character of historic towns. So the only one that would be categorised as that in our own Greenbelt review is Lichfield, which is, I think, over 4 kilometres away from the site, I think it is. And basically, to sort of fail that test, we'd be looking at it forming part of the setting of the historic town. Obviously, it's so distant and is a relatively, moderately low form of development in terms of height. We've said that wouldn't occur. And then also, this land doesn't make a considerable contribution to the special character of that historic town. 4.3 kilometres, sorry, the distance. So again, on that part D, I've concluded that this area of land doesn't make a strong positive contribution to the green belt. Those boxes tick. It has to be looked at a grey belt. Now, then you go on to 10.17 in the report, and it goes, I won't go through it, but that's then the grey belt assessment. So it doesn't mean it's grey belt, build whatever you want on it. There is still obviously a set of policies, national and local, that it goes through, but that's essentially where we came to the grey belt conclusion, if that makes sense. That was all I was going to say in the presentation. And then any questions?
Okay, thank you. Right. Any questions for us? Oh, sorry, good point. There are three speakers today. My apologies. I'm not trying to bypass you. I just got it wrong. The 3 speakers are, there's one objector, there's one applicant's agent, and there is a ward councillor. The objector and the applicant's agent will have 5 minutes to speak. When you've had 4.5 minutes, you'll be asked, you'll be given notice that you've just got 30 seconds left. The councillor has the dispensation to speak for 10 minutes. And the first person to speak will be Steve Holdsworth.
Please deny it won't take 5 minutes.
Correct. Okay, you're right. If you want to have a seat just at the front, please, just so the speakers are in the ceiling, so they should pick up everything you say. So if you clear as you can. The time will start as soon as you start to
Thank you very much, Chair, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by introducing myself as Steve Holdsworth, a resident in Hammerwich and quite local to the site. I don't live in Lionsden. My main concern stems around transport. That is perhaps construction traffic, but certainly maintenance and operation. I was surprised in the officer's summary there that transport and increased traffic wasn't mentioned as a problem and disadvantage to the development going ahead. My particular concern revolves around the location and alternatives to get to site. Obviously, the access is via Lionsden. I appreciate that I can't ask questions, but my concern would be how the traffic gets to Lionsden. Now, that could be from the A5, is a dual carriageway by then, and potentially there will be concerns around speed limits, I would assume. The only alternative is to come in through Hammerwich Place, part of the village. And one of those routes is Hall Lane, which does get an awful lot of, I would say, commuter traffic at particular times of day. The other access from the Walsall Road is Coppice Lane. Declared an interest, that's where I live. And there are 2 concerns there. One is the junction at the, let's call it the railway bridge end of Coppice Lane is very narrow and restrictive. But my main concern is the fact that we have a huge number of ancient and veteran oak trees along that lane. I would say because I'm a chartered environmentalist and a professional forester, that they are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, natural asset that we have in the village. That's been recognised by the council, and nearly all of those veteran trees, including the coppice, which gives Coppice name its lane its name, which is consequentially, by the way, owned by local residents. They have all got tree preservation orders on them. As well as the perhaps minor increase in airborne pollutants from increased traffic, the fact that that lane is very, very narrow would mean that any traffic travelling in the opposite direction to construction, maintenance or operational vehicles for the site will have massive and cause massive damage to soft verges along that lane and consequently to the root protection zones or protected trees. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. We call on the applicant's agent, David Pickford, please. Same rules apply to yourself. You've got 5 minutes and you'll be told when 4.5 minutes is gone.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Chair and members, for this opportunity to speak to you today. I'm representing Elgin Energy, build out many battery storage schemes just like this throughout the country. The application presented today follows a process of proactive working with the council and consultees, which has led to the officer's recommendation for approval, subject to conditions. Notably, there are no objections from a wide range of statutory and non-statutory parties related to the principle of development and technical matters. These include no objections subject to conditions where applicable from the council's landscape consultant, environmental health, the tree officer, ecology team, conservation officer, county archaeology, flood risk team, county public right-of-way officer, the highway authority, national highways, Staffordshire Police and Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. Previous concerns raised by the M6 toll operator have now been addressed thoroughly through suggested conditions as set out by House Officer today, including requirement for a road restraint risk assessment process report submitted for approval in consultation with the M6. Several BESS schemes like this one have already been approved in the adjacent strategic highway network, such as facilities that exist at Bridgewater, Somerset adjoining the M5 and at Rochdale adjoining the M62. Proposed development will increase much needed battery storage capacity within the UK in an optimal location able to connect via existing electricity infrastructure to an existing substation with capacity and agreement in place to connect, whilst located in a suitable position screened by the disused railway embankment to the north and tucked in next to existing road infrastructure to the south, away from residential properties and away from constraints such as flood risk areas and ecology designations. The site comprises of grade 3B agricultural land, and therefore the development avoids the use of best and most versatile agricultural land, whilst also crucially located within a viable distance of Durnwood substation to provide a secure grid connection and help contribute towards meeting climate change and emission reduction targets at international, national and local levels, such as 2030 clean power targets, as well as assist in ensuring local energy security. As outlined in the officer's report, the site is located within the grey belt and does not comprise inappropriate development in the green belt, with development meeting the criteria of paragraph 155 of the PDF. This position is consistent with many recent appeals, such as ones at Chapel Lane, Walsall, Carrington, Manchester and Burcott Farm, Oxfordshire. Proposed development provides suitable landscape mitigation, including extensive new tree, hedgerow and meadow planting, along with appropriate safety measures and drainage strategy, further details of which can be provided through discharge of planning conditions. As shown in the submitted LVIA, which is supported by the Council's landscape consultant, the proposed landscaping strategy will provide effective mitigation, which will ensure that the overall landscape and visual impacts are limited. The proposed development will cause no harm to existing trees, heritage assets, protected species and the local highway network, with conditions proposed to control activity during the relatively short construction period, and there is no impact on any highway trees. There would also be no adverse harm to the immunity of local residents, with development causing no unacceptable harm, with development located away from properties and the EHO providing no objections. There is clear support in both local and national planning policy for the proposed development, with paragraph 168 of the NPPF emphasising that significant positive weight should be given to the benefits associated with renewable carbon energy generation, which this proposed development will deliver. Further benefits comprise the contribution towards UK energy security, the creation of employment during the construction period, assisting the future viability and stability of a local farming business through rural diversification, as well as delivering significant ecological and arboricultural enhancements, resulting in biodiversity net gains of 56.57% for habitats, 144.75% for hedgerows, and 68.03% for watercourse units. The scheme provides clear social, economic and environmental benefits, representing the achievement of sustainable development in accordance with local and national planning policy. It is therefore respectfully requested that planning permission is granted for this proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Leona Lung, if you like to move forwards, you have 10 minutes on us in you can speak. I don't feel you have to use all of it, but your time will start as soon as you start to speak.
Evening, members. I would firstly like to say that the addendum was added on very last minute. I did check just before the meeting and it was only added on. So we would appreciate if it was on the public much earlier on, for much notice for the public, please. So I first like to mention, I support the dive to renewable energy, but it must be done correctly in the right place and not inappropriate developments in the green belt. Hammerwich, like other rural parts of Lichfield District, has its own unique characteristics. Many choose to live, work or visit this area, and many hamlets surrounding due to its fresh air, scenery and wildlife provided by the green belt. So to develop on a green belt, there must be very exceptional reasons. So referring to the map you have, may I emphasize this land is not grey belt. It has no electricity, no water, no drainage. It's prime agriculture land. It cannot be developed on. It can be used for grazing crops. It is green belts. The surrounding fields are green belts. It is not to be pushed for industrialization of the district's green belt. As mentioned, Lichfield District Council have a green belt review underway. Members, is this land allowed to be deemed grey belts in advance to the review being published? There are plenty of brownfield lands by quarries, lands much closer to the substation for connection. Note this proposal requires 3.6 kilometres of connection cables. How would such long connection be made? There are too many questions to ask about this 3.6 kilometres of connection. So referring to the map again, so top of the land, you'll see there's a leisure greenway, which you all know about. So the leisure greenway is about for cycling, walking, intaking the green scenery and appreciating the abundance of life, of wildlife. So it's not about listening to fans constantly running, and it's not a blight for landscape. So should this development proceed, it would affect wildlife in the area, especially with constant lights, constant fan noises and unwanted items released into the air. So referring to map again, if you approach this land, the access is via a single track lane. So even on my visit with a small car, it is very narrow. So imagine when the hedges are overgrown. This will be a very large issue for HGVs as well as emergency vehicles should they be deployed or fire risk happen. So should this be proceeded, HGVs will use various lanes of the area, spoiling people's enjoyment of the area, wearing our roads, which means any maintenance and leading to congestion. So alongside more traffic means more likelihood of accidents. Speaking of risk, members, it is ever so important to note battery energy storage systems do present high fire risk. Should there be an incident, toxic chemicals will be released from the fires to surrounding hamlets, moving on to Hammerwich, Burntwood, Brownhill, Wars, etc. It would be absolutely horrifying. To add on top of the post risk, dense smoke from battery fires reduce visibility on main roads such as Watling Street and the M6 toll next to it, as you can see on the map. Should there be a fire, this is extremely close to the motorway, hence M6 toll have objected to this application. Moreover, contaminated fire and water links to Cranebrook and residents' wildlife use, which is blue on the map. This threatens water quality and aquatic ecosystem. Why should there, if there was one fire, why should wildlife residents, not just in Hamwich, but other outer areas too, suffer from this, not just for short term, but for long term, such as respiratory issues and other long-term health consequences for health for residents. On top, there is a risk of contaminated soil for agriculture. I can go on. Hence, you can see on the planning web link the high number and a detailed amount of responses from residents and parish councillors objecting to this planning application. Members, isn't it best to prioritise the best interests of our community and our environment than letting companies from elsewhere use our green belts and not understanding the fire risk posed to hamlets and villages nearby? And do bear in mind about the battery energy storage system, end of life disposal. Are the batteries recyclable? Batteries degrade over time and require replacement quite very often. Is it really environment friendly? This is more than about renewable energy. Our residents, parish councillors, Network Rail have objected to this. The right of way suggests further legal investigation. The spatial policy and delivery officer informing proposed development would cause harm to green belts through inappropriate development. On top, the attendance today showing the community objecting to this shows no to taking advantage of our green belt and no to anything posing fire risk in our ward. Planning permission should not be granted. It seems there is a sudden rush of endless planning applications for battery energy storage systems by large corporate developments through Staffordshire and UK. This is due to large profits alongside with no national regulations of battery energy storage system safety, which is already talked in Parliament. This needs to be seriously questioned whether it should be allowed. Battery energy storage system is new in technology in these few years. Long-term health and fire risk have not been thoroughly discussed. Hamwich Greenbelt is not for corporate grabs. Members, your committee can stop these large companies taking advantage of Lichfield District's greenbelts. There is not the capacity for this on our greenbelts. By allowing this planning application, a precedent has been set. It will allow grey belt to soon erode green belts. I urge members to reject this planning application. Thank you all.
Thank you, councillor. Speakers, please. Councillor Mears, I think, was first. We're not going in the wrong order, so councillor.
Quite a lot of questions. Do you want me to read them all out, or do you want me to do them piecemeal through the meeting?
I think it's probably best if you tell us all of your points that you wish to make now, and that will give an opportunity to
Okay, thank
answers
you.
prepared.
This question is, what grade has the agricultural land been classed as?
Oh, do you want to go each? Okay, yeah, sorry. Either way, that makes sense because then if someone has the same question, it's covered, I guess. So application was supported by an assessment, so 3B.
Okay.
There is one point in the report I write 3A. I've realised that about an hour before the meeting. So it's 3B, which is moderate, which isn't best and most versatile, which obviously these are directed away from. So 3B, moderate quality.
I believe 3 is still classed as good land.
It's so 3 is broken down to 2 subcategories, A, B. So best and most versatile is 1, 2, 3A, and then 3B on isn't BMV land, which is kind of like, you know, the trigger for protecting that as the best agricultural land.
So the original plan was amended and an entire bank of containers was taken away from proximity to the M6. So this is both yourselves and the developers acknowledging that there is a fire risk, that there is a danger, and that they do pose a danger, otherwise they potentially would have left them in. So the fact that M6 still have almost an entire page of questions within the report we've received shows that that is still not enough to mitigate what they feel. Is there a reason why the entire development is at the bottom of the site, nearest to the M6?
In terms of being at the bottom of the site, I think it was, yes, that was to do with the landscape impacts, because you can actually, it might be better here, but if you look at the topography of the site, it basically goes down as you get there, and some of the views that I showed you, including the one from across that sort of access track, you can see that it mounds up. So it was about basically trying to put this in a bit of a depression to block views from as many angles as possible, and put it next to the M6, because obviously, you know, there's a somewhat unappealing, element of development already there. In terms of moving those away, yeah, exactly like you said, there was originally another rack there. So essentially, there's a sort of safety audit form. There's a GG 104 safety risk assessment that these things go through, and we've been going back and forth with South Staff Fire Rescue Service on these things, who as well initially objected to this, and the applicant's gone through and revised the scheme several times. And the thinking about removing away that line was, if they're within 25 metres of the site boundary, it can be acceptable, but you need to then pass a load of other tests and show a few certain things. And this was going on back and forth, and eventually the applicant decided we can take those ones out, and then we'll be 25 metres away from the boundary. And at that point, they're 43 metres away from the M6 toll, and that basically negates the need for checking, what's on the boundary and things like that. Because basically you're looking at sort of the maximum potential distance that there could be an impact from these things. So they brought them into within the national guidelines, or just in excess of the national guidelines of basically how far they should be away. So we are in a bit of an awkward situation, as you mentioned, with the M6 toll. They're not a statutory consultee. Doesn't mean we completely disregard them. But basically, Fire Rescue Service is now supportive, subject to various conditions. The agent and the applicant and I have been in multiple chats with M6 toll over the last week or two, and we don't have a written update from them. Verbally, they're a lot more agreeable than they were, but I don't want to give any weight to that because we don't have it in writing. We don't have an updated comment. Essentially, from them, from the most recent talk, the main worry on their behalf, because basically a sort of a wind assessment was done, which was showing that, there's a lot of fire prevention measures, smoke prevention measures that have to go through. But on top of that, they looked at the wind, and it's unlikely that if there ever was a fire, it would go towards the M6. And if so, due to the distance moving them back, it's unlikely to have any significant impact. The main outlying concern M6 toll had, when we spoke a few days ago, was basically vehicles coming off the motorway, and this construction now basically bringing a danger to motorists. You come off the motorway, you might hit a tree, you might hit whatever. This is bringing new development that a car could go into. Again, it doesn't sound like anything might need to be done, but this might require basically the installation of some kind of boundary fence or some kind of guardrails along a certain section of the M6. They don't know that yet. We basically all discussed it and agreed that this would be looked into further, but it was agreed that sort of essentially falls somewhat outside of planning. And I don't know whether that would end up being an agreement between the applicant and M6 toll as a private company, whether, maybe mitigating payment is made in order to put something on that boundary. But that's the new condition that I mentioned today, the triple RAP. That's that top one there, which is basically a national assessment in line with the National Highways regs, that essentially looks at the speed of cars, how many cars, what could potentially happen, and then whether you do need to put in some sort of mitigating barrier. So we put that condition on there, and like I said, it's a weird one because it's on one hand, the fire service is happy with this, so I give that obviously more weight than M6 toll having an objection, because essentially the fire service is saying, you've done these mitigation measures, you're this far in off the boundary. It could be someone's back garden. I mean, they haven't said this, but effectively, because they've ticked certain tick boxes, if that was a back garden, we're okay with the fire risk, basically, because of what they brought in and what they've done on site. So this kind of straddles slightly outside of planning, but essentially this will require that assessment, which will look at whether barrier needs to put in. And then I've worded it, if you look at the sort of last line of the first paragraph, where basically if that RAP does identify any kind of measures, they'll need to be implemented prior to the commencement of any above ground development. Because obviously I wanted to go above ground development, not operation, because they'll start building the buildings, and then if there is an issue that a car might come off and hit that, you need that mitigation to be in beforehand. So yeah, so that's a new condition. Sorry.
Okay.
If I can just summarise, then you don't have agreement from the M6 that they're happy with this application.
But I think the condition 3 that came out in the supplementary, says that M6 toll will be part of that agreement.
We don't have agreement in writing yet.
We don't.
No, we don't have.
They're not a statutory consultee, so it's not required. National Highways haven't objected, fire services haven't objected. I appreciate M6 toll is for business and they have to look out for their interests, and they've been really helpful. And it is going in the right direction. But I've sent this condition across. We discussed it and they seem quite amenable to that condition. I've sent it across, but I haven't heard back yet, unfortunately.
Sorry to be monopolising so much of your time. The next question is the access to the site. So measuring from the access to the field to the A5 is a kilometre, just over a kilometre. And all of that is single track. Over half of it has got raised embankments with no passing area. At the entrance to Lion's Den, there's a sign that says 7.5 tonne traffic unless it's a business or with access. Now, further on in this application, it says that for a 9-month period, you're expecting between 1 and 6 HGV lorries a day to be travelling down there. That's almost an impossible level of traffic. At one end of Lion's Den, there's a small triangle of grass and it's got bollards all the way around it. Those bollards go over the electricity supply for that end of Hammerwich, and that there's already been a number of accidents there where the bollards have been touched and it's affected the electricity. Nowhere in this report is any of that addressed. In any other environment, I don't think HGV traffic down a single track lane, it's got no turning points and no passing points, would even be considered as acceptable, especially not for kilometre. How is that dealt with in this report?
So again, I was aware the report was getting long, didn't want to throw everything into it, but yeah, good question. And again, we started with an objection, as with the fire services on that one. Not National Highways, sorry, Staffordshire County Council Highways did object to this originally. So the operational period is 24 trips a year for maintenance and checking the site. So 2 cars a month. There'll be 4x4s or 7.5 tonne vehicles. So we're very relaxed with the operational impact. Look at the construction impact, as you've mentioned, and it basically over that 9 months it should average 1 HGV 2-way trip a day, which I know quite often people I think developers skew the figures, but as given in the construction traffic management plan, quite lucky with this because we've got we can look at the number of buildings on site. They can be very accurate with the number of HGV movement. So it's basically, like you said, between no more than 6, 1 a day on average, and then the first 3 months will average 5 a day. The first 3 months is that period of elevated impact. So again, like I said, SCC Highways originally objected. They're now in support of the application, subject to several conditions that are put into the report. Essentially, what really changed it was changing the access, so it does come down Coppice Lane, as discussed earlier, then down Walsall Road onto the roundabout for safe joining onto the A5.
That's the bit that's got the bollards around it that you can't get a HGV round. Why has that been the accepted access route when it goes straight past houses that are literally on the verge?
So a swept path analysis was submitted, using local data that went through SCC Highway. So they demonstrated that you can get an HGV down there. No easy. I mean, this, of course, but we've had the information submitted. There's going to be a sort of walkover beforehand where we look at the site. And
2 cars can't. Not quite sure how a HGV is going to.
So there wouldn't be any passing. Howard, if I go through this, there wouldn't be any passing. So basically, there's a few mitigation measures that were put in, which is basically when the SCC Highways then remove their objection, and this will all be secured through a construction management plan. But basically, HGV trips will be scheduled. So you're not bunching them up. You're having them at certain times of day, all outside of peak hours. And then, if something's outside of schedule, all ahead, there are waiting spots for them to wait in, so there's no bunching up. Escort vehicles and banksmen and temporary road signs will essentially monitor and you know, potentially temporarily close off a road for the vehicle to just navigate down there, at which point under vehicle escort and under direction by a banksman. So that's why, so we're basically avoiding any impact from head-on vehicles coming the other way.
Ask for your consideration on this. When there are two ends to the lane, and one goes through all the houses and a very tight access, and has got bollards over where the mains electric supply is, which has been a contention, and you've got access directly off the A5, why would you send it through the houses?
It was to do with the joining point onto the A5. So National Highways wouldn't support new direct access, or that access on, like you said, where it most makes sense. They wouldn't support it there because you're basically coming out of T junction, so the HGVs couldn't get up to speed when joining the road. Yeah, I mean, there's no more that can be provided, but it's, yeah. Yeah, so it's all that's been put into the mix. And like I said, Staffordshire County Council removed their objection. They're satisfied that it can be addressed through that. There will be construction impact. It's a very limited time at 3 months. And like I said, 5 HGVs essentially, or potentially 6 at some point, spaced throughout the day outside of peak hours. They're satisfied that it can be handled by the road.
Protection for the M6 should there be a fire. But Network Rail have mentioned that there's no protection in place for their asset, the railway, should there be a fire there. And I appreciate that it's not required under planning law, but it will be using that path. And there's no time limit to the times of day that the public can use that path, or what vehicles they use on it. There e-bikes and what have you. There's absolutely no provision in here for keeping the public safe. And if there is a fire,
I mean, in terms of fire, are you talking about the public footpath or the greenway?
The greenway. What? And my other sort of point on that is the greenway. Lichfield is investing money into to make it into a tourist attraction, to invite people to enjoy the countryside. And yet we're looking here at building, it isn't a substation, but it has a very similar activity to a substation with providing electricity to the local population. You're literally building a blip on the landscape when we're ploughing, as a city, ploughing money into something that is meant to be a tourist attraction to invite people to enjoy the countryside. I don't see how having a battery storage facility at the end of the greenway is really going to encourage people to come to Lichfield, get on the greenway at Lichfield, go all the way to the other end, when all there is a battery storage facility to see.
So this is a view basically going down the access path. So obviously the greenway is just going to be on the other side of these trees. So there is more planting on the boundary. And if you see the way the land is, it kind of falls away. It won't be very visible from that angle. Again, it hasn't been implemented yet. And it's one of those ones where the national rail issues, they were basically going to be dealt with through like a basic asset protection agreement, which falls outside of planning, and that'll be something that the applicant, due to the site being within, I think 10 metres is the trigger of national rail land, they have to enter that agreement with the applicant. But again, it comes back to, in terms of fire, the fire services, and you know, if we go to the proposed site plan, they've pulled it in so that it's not within X amount of the rail line. So the fire service have obviously looked at this in terms of the impact on every element around it and are supportive. And you know, we as a council don't have any information that sort of goes against that. So I appreciate, obviously, you know, these are very new, and appreciate, you know, there's a lot of questions, but when all the statutory consultees are in support, you know, we kind of have to have a very strong reason to go against that. So in terms of fire risk, fire services are on board. We've got multiple conditions to, you know, for updated details. They've got various mitigation measures. You know, one of them, they've got 228 cubic meters of water essentially stored below. And then these systems are monitored constantly at all times for heat, smoke, everything. And then, you know, they can be shut down. They're separated by 3 meters, and basically each container is its own sort of self-serving area to stop propagation of fire from one to the other. So if things start going wrong, there are measures in place to affect that, essentially. And then the National Rail, I mean, that was, yeah, I mean, you know, they've commented, but essentially the applicant needs to go through a process with them as they would if they were building pretty much anything next to, you know, if they were building hay bales there.
Yeah, I'm nearly done, so we can come up for my last comment is that obviously you can see from the number of residents here, there's a huge strength of feeling about this application, and the strength of feeling is they resolutely do not want it. And at no point through this application have you given enough weight to the residents' feelings about this. You can see that you're doing your best to mitigate potential damage, but when the entrance to the site is 1 kilometre long down a single track road, all it takes is one broken down car and emergency services can't get there. There's no plan B. And also, I think it's new for the residents to find out that the main thoroughfare for the construction traffic is literally past their front door. There's bigger applications that have been refused by all of the district councillors purely on the strength of the residents' feelings. And I feel we could be getting to that point with this one.
Oh, I mean, what I'd say, obviously, you know, we encourage, you know, people get involved in the planning process, absolutely. And every comment, I went through every single comment and listed every single issue and considered every single issue. However, I mean, we're sort of held as planners and as the council to the development plan. So it's our local plan, national planning policy framework. We're held to that. Now, you know, whilst, you know, feeling towards an application, I can completely understand it, fully understand it. That's not a reason for refusal. So, you know, if we're talking about impact on residents, you've got, obviously, as you've raised, you know, there's the issue with vehicle movements, which is presented quite low vehicle movements, and I'd say, as having seen a lot of applications, you know, there's other issues you might want to raise, such as whether it be noise, whether it be etc., 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 has all been covered off. So I appreciate, and then, like I say, in terms of the visual impact, sort of highlighted that, or sort of strongly suggest this is grey belt by the government's own assessment procedure that I've undertaken. So, you know, I have absolutely gone through every bullet point that I've written from all the objections received. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Gareth. You have been very thorough. You mentioned that was the last point. Is that the last point?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Ashton, please.
Okay, to me, the key point was whether we are building on green belt or grey belt. So I open my NPPF paragraph 143. It strikes me that, which you will find on page 28, for those of you who've got the thing, point 1122. And taking point A into consideration, since this kind of battery facility must be located away from built-up areas, it seems that paragraph A, almost by definition, can be discarded. As far as B is concerned, 11.5 in here defines the large built-up areas. They're relatively close. They're both less than a mile away. Large housing developments can extend over several hundred metres, and actually there may be a benefit to putting the battery storage unit here, because it actually will prevent the joining up to areas. Point C does not apply. I agree with D, with the officers on D. The other thing was that it seemed odd to me that parcel BA5, I think you mentioned that we are only talking about 0.25% of BA5. It is lower grade agricultural land. But against my first feelings, I have to agree that this is actually grey belt or green belt, given 143 with the NPPF. One other point that I would like to make is that this is actually a very, very small, in national terms, battery facility. I think that we worked out that we're about a 270th of the national requirements, which means we would have to have 270 things this size scattered throughout the country. This will not be the first in Lichfield if we carry on at this size. just make that as a point. Another point I'd like to raise is the archaeological side of things. The field is adjacent to where the Staffordshire hoard was discovered. There must be a complete archaeological plan and process defined as in condition 11 here. It would be a tragedy if a second Staffordshire hoard was not discovered, or if evidence pointing to why the Staffordshire hoard was where it was, a pile of Viking bones or Saxon bones, for example. The archaeology must be done thoroughly. I would like to recommend another condition which relates to security. We have fences, we have lighting, we have CCTV in place. I would like Staffordshire Counter-Terrorism to examine this site with a view to defending it against any possible infrastructure attack by hostile state actors. It's obviously relatively easy to fly a drone into this thing over the top of the fence and drop explosives on something. I would like to make sure that Staffordshire Police CT are involved in this and can make a risk assessment.
Thank you. The two things there with the counter-terrorism request, which I would hope the police aspects do look at, but if we can query as to whether or not they have taken that into account, in reality, in this day and age with the drone, have we got any assets that aren't vulnerable? The archaeological survey, I think that gets mentioned within one of the
Condition 11, I think.
Condition 11 is fairly full.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Cheers, thank you. Just a quick question: is how are we going to manage the traffic congestion of when the site, if he does go ahead? Because as Councillor Mears point out, that it's down a single file lane. As someone myself who's driven buses and coaches, I know driving down tight roads is a pain in the backside, to say the least, especially when there's another car coming your way. So my question is there going to be a job vacancy for someone just to sit on the road with a stop and go sign, just to manage the traffic congestion?
Yes, essentially, yes. That's one of the measures, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salter.
Yeah, I'm in no way against the future proofing, shall we say, for the country in respect of green issues. But I do have concerns. There are so many, and we've heard new ones this evening, unanswered questions and concerns. We've had new concerns or statements given to us just late this evening. I'm grateful to Gareth for his fairly concise description of how grey belt is defined, and I wasn't particularly clear on that to start with. And now a little bit clearer. I think we could all do with digesting the situation a little bit further. My feeling on this, with so many questions, is that it should be deferred, and if it is deemed to be deferred, then it should and must come back to council automatically, to committee rather, automatically, and not wait for a call in.
Right, thank you. We'll hear the other speakers and the others. I think I'm right in saying that during the course of the presentation, though we have spent a lot of time on grey belt, the very special circumstances and the national infrastructure needs also suggest that this will be recommended for approval, even if it's recognised as green belt. So I think we might be heading a little bit down a rabbit hole in deciding whether it's green belt is yes, it's no, and if it's, but you can clarify whether I've interpreted that correctly.
Yeah, essentially, there's been a slew of appeals of these, and not copying them, but I've obviously considered them. But what a lot of the inspectors did was look at it as grey belt and green belt. So that's what I did. So concluded that in both of them it would be acceptable.
Recommendations of grey belt or green belt. Okay, Councillor Anketel.
Global warming is the biggest threat facing our civilization. That means we need more renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources don't provide continuous energy, so we need battery storage facilities like this one. And traffic movement, during construction, there will be more traffic movement than normal. But during ordinary maintenance purposes, I think the officer was saying there'll be 1 or 2 trucks a month. Still you're talking about congestion once it's been built. So we can't afford not to have these storage units. And I'm proposing that we support the officer's recommendation that we approve this with the conditions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cross, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm here very patiently listening to all these arguments. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced with the officer's report. I do wonder whether he's working for the agent or working for the council. Sorry to say that, but he did a very good selling job here tonight, which is quite annoying. I'm quite concerned here about the traffic management plan. There doesn't seem to be a proper traffic management plan. You're coming down some very narrow roads here and through the village. I've been through that village once, and I don't see anything here about a traffic management plan, and that's something we all ask for in any of our development. And I think this should be deferred until we've got more information and some of the questions answered.
Sorry, is that a motion for deferral? Are you proposing a motion for deferral?
I propose to defer.
Can I respond?
Councillor Saunder's already proposed a deferral, so that's a second.
You second.
I second that.
Thank you.
If you're going to table a motion for deferral, you need to provide clear reasons for the deferral. So you need to set out what information you.
I'd like to see a proper traffic management plan here. We don't have one.
Can I respond briefly? There was so one was submitted. It was reviewed by National Highways and SCC Highways, who both are in support of the application. And then on top of that, there's also condition 7, the construction and environmental management plan, which has construction access hours, routing of HGVs, delivery times, temporary traffic measures, etc., etc. So that will secure the additional details, and very normal to have that as a condition. But we do have a draft construction traffic management plan with us already, which was reviewed and supported by the specialist officers at the county council.
So why was it not submitted to us for tonight to look at? Or is that another addendum that's not come to us?
No, that condition was on. I mean, it's a 100-page document. I appreciate that there's, we can't cover everything. I've written reports that are 200 pages. You don't want that. So, we've taken everything, we've put everything up to the specialist officers. And everything's available on the website. Sorry. So yeah, it is up there for view. And as I say, been reviewed by the specialist highways officers who support it.
Not here tonight in front of us. That's my issue.
Document, public document.
It's a public document which has been through the specialist departments who have the statutory rights to make an objection. Right. Okay. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, I really want to echo what Councillor Elk told that we do need these areas. So I'd second his proposal to accept this, but also I do have concerns about the highways. I know the area well. I do think we'd struggle, the developers would struggle to get an HGV down there. And I just want to put on record, I don't think you're working for the agents, and I think the councillor was wrong to suggest that.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. I agree as well. Councillor Mears, I believe you want to come back in.
Yeah, I'd like to speak strongly, very strongly, on behalf of the residents. The traffic management plan has not gone to public consultation with the residents. They were unaware of the contents of this plan, and you are asking us as district councillors to pass an application which will affect their entire lives for the coming year minimum without their knowledge of what we are voting on.
Fully understand. There were probably thousands of pages on this application alone.
I'll be honest with you. There are residents here that will put the time and effort into reading every single word because it affects their life. We're here to vote and represent them.
I fully understand, but obviously we can't forget that appeal is always an option and cost is always an option. So I fully understand what you're saying, but you know, the council has followed all its statutory requirements. Technical documents were online, publicly available and available for viewing. So that
Before you carry on,
Councillor Mears, can I just, excuse me, I'm chair, if you don't mind.
I haven't finished
I know
speaking.
you haven't spoken. Can I just make a point first, please? If you wish to speak on behalf of the objectors, you should put yourself forward for that. We are here as a non-political group to make decisions based on policies and on district council policies and national guidance. That's what we're here to do as individuals, to use our own conscience to make those decisions as what we balance against public residents and against the national needs. Now, those are very, very difficult decisions. I will let you continue now. I just wanted to make that point.
I would like to reiterate that politics hasn't come into it. And as a resident and landowner in Hanbridge, I definitely have a lot of information about the issues there, as I am one of them. So I speak from my own point of view, as well as those of the other residents. You speak strongly about everything having a green tick next to it, and I'm trying to highlight strongly that it doesn't. We have got a void of information. There are gaps in what you're asking us to decide on. That's been highlighted by Councillor Cross, and I think the strength in which he speaks as well shows that as a district council, we're not in agreement that everything is okay.
Okay. At the moment, I have two people putting forward to defer. I have one person proposing this, and Councillor Anketel proposing. Councillor Galvin seconding. I have two people suggesting deferral, Councillor Salter and Councillor Cross. So I'm going to put to a vote first whether or not, but before we go to deferral, we need to have some reasons to why what we're going to defer on.
Absolutely, yes.
So that the vote on deferral then first, because
It will be done first. Will be done first.
Does that make sense? If you want me to explain.
Jesus Christ.
I think that's an excellent job. Christine, our governance officer,
Coach driver,
lead on these things. He's going to explain the procedures involved in what's going to happen now. My understanding is that we need to vote on whether or not the substantive motion becomes the option to defer. If we vote in favour that it can be the main option, then we vote on whether or not we defer. I think the second option, and if that is defeated, we would then move on to the substantive process, which is the application to approve, which has been seconded. But if deferred.
Well, you've said it all, Chair, but I just wanted to make it very clear, especially to the people in the room, because it can seem very, very technical. We have a couple of councillors here and they'll completely understand what I'm about to say. But there's going to be, in essence, 2 votes for each kind of proposal put forward. The reason is the first vote will not be to actually defer. This first vote will be for the committee to agree whether that becomes what we call the substantive motion. So in essence, it replaces the officer's recommendation. Then if that passes, we will then vote again to actually defer. So I don't want you all to kind of get excited that there's been one vote, because there's actually got to be a second one. If it is defeated and doesn't become what we call the substantive motion, it's kind of dead then we go to the next proposal that has been seconded, which is for approval. The same thing will happen. So there will be a vote for that to be, well, it already is a substantive motion. So actually with that one, we will go straight for approval. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I just wanted it to be clear so you all understand the decision-making process. Okay.
Justine,
Thank
can
you.
I just ask a further question on that? If we vote to make it the substantive proposal, do we then have a debate on the grounds for that deferral to going forwards, which would then give officers and legal advice an opportunity to see whether or not they're reasonable reasons in the first place to us then make a vote?
Yes, because in essence, all you're doing is voting to replace the recommendation.
Right.
You can then have a debate whether you actually decide that you do want to defer. Because
Okay.
it could then lose again, you know, the deferral could lose it that second vote. Hoping Max is kind of nodding with me as well.
No, that's absolutely right.
Thank you.
It's a substantive motion, then there has to be clear reasons given for the deferral before it's voted on.
Okay, so at the moment I'm looking to put to a vote whether or not we put we make the substantive motion a deferral. So can I have a show of hands of?
Do we not need the reason first?
No, that comes afterwards before we actually do the vote. So
Before we go down that, but can I ask, as we've had a proposal and a seconder for deferral, is there any way that we cannot make that vote, that we can avoid actually proceeding with a vote on that topic?
you've just heard
Been
the
seconded.
explanation as to the rules, as to the way this operates.
Yes.
Yeah, so we definitely have a vote on deferral.
Yes, so it was proposed by councillor Salter and seconded by councillor Cross.
Yes.
Okay, so the vote is as to whether or not we change the substantive motion to deferral. Can I have all those in favour of that, please? All those against? 6, 7. Super. It is my decision, but on the basis that we've gone 7-7 at the moment, what I would like to do is continue the debate to see if there are any grounds, to see what grounds there are that are being put forward for that deferral. Before we go to the overall substantive vote, once the conditions are known from those who want to vote against.
Chair, can we make it clear that your casting vote is to make it the substantive motion then? Because if you wish to debate, actually.
Yes.
Thank you. You've used your casting vote. Thank you, Chair.
So the grounds can be put forward.
Okay.
Salter.
Thank you, Chair. I mentioned when I suggested deferral, there is a lot of new information come to the table this evening from presentations, from councillors, from members, from officers, and of course through emails late on the day. And I think it's only fair to communities, could be, because more of these applications will come in. I think it's only right that we fully understand and absorb all of this information before we make a decision. It's really as simple as that, so that we're all.
Are you able to clarify which new information it is that you're questioning?
Well, we've had emails this evening with new conditions and reports about conditions. We've had the explanation about how, I know that you mentioned that trail green doesn't really come into it, but it still sort of clouds the mind a little bit. We've had explanations as to how grey belt is determined. We've learned, which is not in the report, about this electricity concern with the bollards at a main entrance. All of these things, I think, need clarification, and that it is brought back to this committee for final assessment when everybody is absolutely clear on all of the questions and concerns that have been raised.
But primarily putting forward the conditions were late. I think they have been fully explained during the course of this meeting. The traffic management plan is the main thing that you're putting forward in relation to something that definitely needs further work.
Yeah.
Councillor Mears?
Incomplete information provided through the consultations. We don't have the full picture yet.
This is in relation to M6.
Partly, yes.
So I don't quite, through you, Chair, sorry, I don't quite understand why M6 toll are not given a similar status to our own county highways. I mean, it is a major trunk road. Okay, it's private operation, but it is still a highway.
It is a highway, and I would have assumed the highways would talk to M6 toll. My understanding when I read the report is that the issues for moving it further back is not necessarily the issue for the plant itself. It's primarily because what happens if an HGV leaves the road and goes into the battery storage. Councillor Mears again.
I do apologise for monopolising so much of your time. If we agree that this application is not deferred, we are setting a precedent within the area that is acceptable for an application on this kind of development to go ahead with incomplete information. And we are here to drill into the details to ensure that it all comes into the daylight. I think it would be negligent of all of the councillors here if we didn't defer this to dig into the details further.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to add any? At the moment, we've got traffic management plan. Perhaps I need to.
Just to clarify then, we'd be deferring on the basis that we are reviewing the highways information, the construction management plan, and the consultations linked to that. M6 tool.
Yeah.
And I think further reference to the residents' objections will assist with sorting those out. I believe they've been glossed over.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry, Councillor Hughes.
I think some of it is that we haven't all read all the documents publicly available. I would have a question about the very eloquent Councillor Long raised about noise, but there is a noise abatement thing on the planning portal that I must confess I haven't fully read. So some of the deferring is us to read the stuff that is all publicly available, rather than just depending on Gareth doing that very elaborate proposal.
I appreciate what's been said. I understand everyone's point of view. I understand the public's point of view. There are, Gareth said, thousands of pages in relation to this, and we ask for our officers who are paid professionals a summary of that and then answer questions at this. Councillor Wallens.
Thank you.
Sorry, let me go. Sorry, Councillor Wallens. Sorry, Councillor Hughes.
Had another point. It's not as many as some of my colleagues have, but another perhaps relatively minor outstanding issue is the communication tower, which is 16 metres high, going to be 60 metres high, but we don't know much about that. Again, if we do have the chance to defer, which that the sort of visual impact of that on the landscape is something that I would like to know more about.
I don't know if the noise was the question, but it's essentially, like you say, so all this goes in front of any specialist officers, then they come to us as the case officer, and then it goes into the report. On that one, environmental health are completely supportive. It was, I think it's like the projected noise as a worst case scenario, all fans running in the night. It was 9 decibels, lower than the existing background noise in the worst case scenario. So, completely inaudible. So yeah, like you say, that's gone into here. Yes, so on that one, essentially it wasn't included in the section. We know the height of it, and in order to address that, which is fairly common, you get elements that aren't on the plans, whether anything from bike sheds to whatever. I appreciate this one is a bit taller, but also it's a lot narrower. But there is a condition there that has details of construction materials, details of exactly what paint type it is. And then, so what I did when that came to light is add in detailed drawings and material finish of the communications tower. And those are details to be submitted to be reviewed by, officers prior to commencement of development. I think that one is.
Okay, okay. Councillor Wallens?
Cheers, thank you. My reason for deferral is because a picture of Councillor Mears, I pointed out that if there's a fire or battery leak, it will contaminate the water, affecting loads of residents as for in food consumption and so forth. And I haven't heard or seen anything. There's going to be a way to monitor water levels, make sure that it is drinkable or if it's not been polluted at all.
Oh, good question. Yeah. So there's a drainage strategy was submitted alongside a flood risk assessment with the application. So the main, as part of the construction environmental management plan, that gets dealt with under measures that come in, go to SEC Highways, other officers under condition. But in terms of, I think you're talking about operational, the main risk to the groundwater contamination is, you know, in the, again, I must stress, in very, very unlikely event of a fire, if that were to happen, obviously the chief mitigation is this 228 cubic meters of water I mentioned, which is then sprayed, and that basically the county was it National County Fire Chiefs, I think, is, but they basically require I think something like 1900 liters an hour to be able to be sprayed for a 2 hour. Basically, there's an amount of water you need that is seen as acceptable to mitigate fire. But obviously, the issue is where does that water go? So the drainage system basically will funnel it, and there's a second 228 cubic meter tank that's empty, and any water that comes out to put out the fire, and as you say, will touch the batteries, might get contaminated, is basically you know, directed into this spare tank, which is the same size, so it'll go in there.
Cheers, thank you. It's just more of a like a supplementary question. Would it be possible to have a look at the COSH files and all that, controlled substances, hazardous to health, to see how it's going to be dealt with in that way? Because me as a bricklayer, I know if I poured petrol into a generator and it spills on the floor, you have to go and pick up the contaminated dirt and specialise in disposing of it that way. So I would love to see the COSH assessments and all that.
Is that for construction?
Well, for construction, and how if there is a battery leak, of how that it's going to be dealt with in disposal and collected.
So the construction period, there's the construction environmental management plan, like I said, of which there's a draft. Part of that requires a site waste management plan, which basically will determine where that site waste is going, you know, and like require separation where relevant. In terms of operation, there is a condition, so we have already details of that in a outline battery management plan, and then that's been put in as part of a updated fire safety report. So that requires, so there's no, I mean, obviously a lot of this will fall under the Roofing Act, I'm assuming, a lot of it there, but that will require details, as you say, of batteries, how regularly they're replaced and things like that. In terms of normal operation, I mean, as far as I've seen and everything I've looked at, there's no risk of that. I've not seen it.
Because I would imagine there's already been a risk assessment into all of this.
Yeah.
So has there not been a COSH assessment or anything in relation to it all?
Not sure what that is.
Right,
Controllers.
The fire brigade and the building inspectors will be the ones responsible for looking at the way in which a development goes ahead. Building inspectors check at the site on a regular basis, and it's down to their plans and instructions to how things are developed. In relation to the fire, any fire hazards or otherwise, any COSH assessments will be done by the fire brigade, and knowing what it is they're going to assess and what they're going to use, I would prefer to leave to the specialists of the fire brigade, I've got to be honest, rather than us making a decision what we'd use on something. Okay. I'm just looking, are there any other deferral comments?
There was very limited access onto the site. The council facilitated all of the district councillors to go on site and see the access to walk it. Can I request that we have the same provided for this application, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Will I, Chair?
Okay, have you got some summaries of what the grounds are for?
I'll
Deferral?
summarise the deferral reasons then. Reason one is for a review of the highways information, including the construction management plan. An update to the response from M6 tool. A review of residents' objections. And further information on the communications tower. And then lastly, a site visit for members to.
Okay, on that basis, then we'll move to a vote in relation to whether or not this matter gets deferred. All those in favour of it being deferred to a further meeting for the reasons given.
Yes.
Any against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. That was a very long debate. We'll look at give people an opportunity to look further into the stuff they haven't read. 1,000 pages.
Good point. May I chair through you, supplementary to it? Nowhere in the public pack, I know councillors and long-serving members, we probably know better in that sense, but the public, nowhere in the public pack does it say there's a lot more information about this. Go to www whatever. It's the information that's good. We're hearing thousands of pages of more.
Councillor Salter, I agree that is the case, but we probably need to put it on the site full stop, because every single application we hear is based on the professional judgments and the case being put together by the officers. So
it's reassurance for the public. They've heard this evening that there's all these papers and background information from the various quarters that substantiate their claims, etc., mitigate problems. The public are not aware of that because simply they're with respect to the public, they don't know that there's a lot more information out there that they are privy to because it's in the public domain. But it doesn't
It's all in one place on the planning reference, and that's the case for all of our applications.
View planning applications, every single piece of
Essentially, I realise where the confusion's come from. So we list the plans and supporting documents that are being approved in the report. Now, you don't necessarily approve everything. So not everything would be in, like a design and access statement isn't approved document. So it's not listed in that amount. It does, it's all on the website, but that's why.
I appreciate that, but the public doubts, and I'm looking at fairness to the public.
Okay, thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you to the people who've come along as well. Thank you for your patience on this lovely evening to sit in here. The air conditioning is working a bit. Thank you very much. Moving on to this, our second application for this evening. This is application, the Little Day Nursery, Streetley. This is application /00617/FUL. Challoner to present on this one, please. Thank you, Gareth.
Cheers, sorry.
You go.
See you in a bit.
About that. Okay, moving on to the Little Ripley Day Nursery. So this is the second item on the agenda tonight. I think it's the third report in the pack, so we've shuffled things around a little bit. This application was called in by Councillor Powell with concerns regarding the impacts on residential amenity and the noise impacts arising from the proposal. On the screen is the location plan. So it shows the red line around the nursery, and it's in a predominantly residential area. Although to the end, towards the end of the road, Streetley Lane, we've got some commercial space, a co-op, a fish and chip shop, etc. Aerial view shows it's one of our leafy suburbs. These photographs show the building as it stands at the moment. So just to highlight a bit of the background in the report, the existing building was approved, I think extensions were approved in 2021, but then it did come back before committee in 2022 because the whole building was demolished and it wasn't extension. So we regularised the new building. The building was approved of 16 parking spaces at the front, which you can kind of see on photograph 1. And it was approved on the basis of 50 children being operating. We have had, the report does talk about the enforcement complaint in March this year. The enforcement complaint was closed as there was no condition restricting capacity on the previous application. So again, you've just got the front and the rear elevations there. These are views from the rear of the site, photograph 3 looking towards the rear boundary, and photograph 4 looks down the side of the building, and that's predominantly where the aircon units that are referred to in the report would be situated on towards the ground on the side of the building. The next slide shows the the increased parking layout. In terms of how they've managed to squeeze in the extra 6 spaces, there was sort of 2 areas in the middle that were left previously. They weren't allotted parking, and there's an extra space popped in up here. The visibility has also been looked at as part of this application. These are the proposed layout and elevation plans. I think the easiest, the extension is effectively what we've got at the moment is 3 gables, and it sits on top. It sort of sits on top in the middle of the building. So you now have a ridge height going along the top, whereas currently there isn't. The first floor, creates a central ridge, which is about 0.6 meters higher than the highest ridge height gable ridge at the moment. So as I said before, parking would be increased, and we're also looking at 8 air conditioning units and 1.8 metre fencing along the eastern boundary. So that's right next to them aircon units with the neighbouring property. The capacity would be increased to 77 children. So if I just quickly run through That's the last slide I have. If I just quickly run through, the principle of the development is in accordance with our national and local planning policies that support education facilities. The design is considered to be acceptable within its context. The residential amenity, there's been quite a bit of work done on this. We have recently refused an application because the environmental health officer considered that the noise information was lacking in certain respects. And the applicants have gone away and revised the noise assessment, which now covers all of that information that the environmental health officer requested. So in terms of residential amenity and noise, I would reiterate our environmental health officer has accepted the information, and he has proposed 2 conditions. One relating to the use of the aircon units, that they'll only be used between 7 in the morning and 7 at night. And prior to the installation of the units, they've got to demonstrate that, prior to the first use of the aircon units, they've got to demonstrate to us that they are the spec that is in this noise document. In terms of parking and I should say as well that the environmental health officer has looked at the parking noise and so on as well. In terms of parking, the parking and circulation areas are acceptable. The county highways team are happy with that. So on that basis, we don't have any strong reasons to refuse this application. It is recommended for approval and with a number of conditions that are set out in the officer report. That concludes my.
We've got 2 speakers in relation to this. First one from the objector, William Daly. Available. William, if you want to come and have a seat towards the front, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. If you were here, you've already watched how it happens. 5 minutes to speak. When you reach 4.5 minutes, you'll be given a reminder. You've just got 30 seconds left to wind up. And your time will start as soon as you start speaking.
Well, good evening. Thank you for letting me address the committee. I live at 15 Burnett Road next to the nursery, and have been asked by my neighbours at 19 Burnett Road, who also join the nursery, and other neighbours in Burnett Road and Leslie Road, to voice our concerns regarding this application. Burnett Road is a sought-after residential area in Little Aston and is included in the Little Aston Neighbourhood Plan. Following this committee's decision to grant planning permission for a 50-place nursery, our lives have been changed somewhat. We're woken at 6:30 in the morning and staff arrive in cars, and at 7 AM parents arrive, always in cars. The children and a proportion of babies sometimes not happy to be separated from their parents, and cries and grizzles are not uncommon. We've now found out that instead of a maximum of 50 children, an Ofsted inspection reported 61 children in attendance and 69 on the roll. In fact, we've now been told by Tom Watts that this committee did not set a maximum number for children attending. That implies that 100+ children could attend. I mean, who regulates these premises if not this local authority? What about overcrowding? What about fire safety and staff ratio to children? The demographic for Little Aston does not require an increase in preschool places, and the demand for these places is coming from Birmingham and Walsall, with parents travelling relatively long distances, which isn't good environmentally. Now we see a further application to increase to 77 children and an increase in staffing, with the former front garden completely tarmacked over, more in keeping with a quick fit garage or a McDonald's car park. Completely tarmacked the whole of the front garden. Completely at odds with the Little Aston Neighbourhood Plan, and I quote from section 513 of the plan. Generally, parking areas to the front of the property using the front garden will not be acceptable unless it's the prevailing pattern of parking in the locality. The proposal to remove the front lawns as part of this application further alienate this property from a residential neighbourhood. I understand currently that the heating and cooling for this property is located within the building. The proposal to create a series of 8 units externally adjacent to Mr. and Mrs. Ashby's fence is totally unacceptable. Have members of the committee heard the noise one of these units make? And this application proposes to put 8 of them together. You've said that they won't come on till 7 in the morning, but presumably that's when the staff arrive, they'll be turned on. So it's warm when they arrive. Why can't an alternative form of heating and cooling be specified? Or why can't these noisy units be located at the rear of the play area and not up against Mr. and Mrs. Ashby's fence? Who wants to sit in a garden with friends and have a constant background noise of 8 industrial heat pumps? Core Policy 3 and Policy BE1 of the Lichfield Local Plan Strategy and the National Planning Policy Framework sets out to maintain the residential amenity of neighbouring occupiers. Don't we have the right to quiet enjoyment of our homes and gardens? If you approve this application as it is, we will have over 200 car movements to and from this property daily, plus the noise of industrial-sized heat pumps from, I thought, 6 o'clock in the morning, but you're saying it's 7. With over 77 children, the play area at the back of the property will have some children in it almost all day. The acoustic fencing has proved to be an inadequate density and height, has still not been completed, even though it was a condition of the previous planning approval. A 1.8 metre gap adjoining my garden has still not been completed. I do wonder about the safety of the children and babies, and if staff ever have, if there's a fire within the nursery. Staff and children are likely to be in the play are unable to get to a place of safety. There are only narrow passageways down the side of the building, and with windows and doors likely to fail in a fire, would not be safe to use for escape. To the rear of property is a busy railway freight line, which further traps the play area. Perhaps Staffordshire Fire Service should comment. For the reasons I have just given, my neighbours and I object strongly to this application.
Time, please.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Daly. The next speaker is Ruth Appleby, the Director. I don't think I need to repeat it again, but you'll be reminded when there's 30 seconds to give. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair and committee members. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak this evening. As you've heard, I'm Ruth Appleby. Little bit nervous, it's a long time to wait, so I'm going to read.
Don't be nervous, don't worry.
I am the founder of the Little Ripley Day Nurseries. We are a family-run business. We love our nurseries. We give our nurseries 110% of our time. I'm 72 and I'm still going strong. Our nursery at Burnett Road was originally opened in 1929 and was advertised as a private school for providing education for girls and boys. Therefore, this building has had the sound of tiny feet and of children from then till now. In the 1980s, land purchased from British Railways enabled the play area to extend well back, way back. We've had visits from our fire officers, everything is perfectly safe. The garden is screened by mature trees and of course the railway line at the back, which obviously is very fenced off. Although tiny gaps for the children to watch the trains, and they can be very noisy. We do not wish to increase the number of children that we're going to have outside at one time. When we rebuilt our nursery, we replicated the look of the original building. We have no wish to change or extend the footprint of this building. We're not going to put any extensions around the building. Our air conditioning units are outside of the building. They're in the valleys. They're not new additions. So they're currently in the valley of the building. There's 3 valleys. We would like to extend into the roof space, filling the valleys, creating 2 new rooms and a comfortable staff room. We would like to relocate the air conditioning units to ground floor level, and they will be surrounded by acoustic fencing. Environmental health officers have confirmed the units are very quiet. They're not industrial. They're not commercial. They're just small units. The units will not operate at weekends or after 6 p.m. They are a huge advantage to our staff and children, and the couple loves them too. Children's ability to regulate their body temperature is less efficient than adults, especially in infancy. Air conditioning units allow us to keep the room at 20 degrees Celsius. It's perfect for the children, and especially in days like today. Yes, we see ourselves at Burnick Road as a community nursery, and we have no wish to upset the community of Streatley Village. We allowed our neighbours to look at our CCTV when they were burgled, and we allow Mr. Daly to access his garden from our car park. Sometimes he may obstruct a car parking space to access his garden. We've never, ever complained. We operate strictly within our permitted hours, between 7 and 6. Drop-offs and collections are very staggered, unlike schools. We adhere to all Ofsted and planning regulations.
30 seconds remaining.
I confirm the majority of our children live locally in B74. And what if they come from King's Standing? They're all God's children. The demand for places far exceeds availability with our waiting list, at present now closed. If you give us permission today, we will take children off this waiting list. Thank you for your time.
Very much. Extremely well timed. I think you had 2 seconds remaining. Okay, councillors. Councillor Powell, if you want to start.
Yes, I think I'll start as I was the one who called it in. It is a long-established company, and it's quite right what the objectors say in that it doesn't match with the general start of the domestic dwellings that come after the shops, so the chip shop and that going down that side of the road and the other side. However, with the conditions that we have put forward tonight, or are going to put forward tonight, I think it is more than well covered, and it is a thriving business, and we ought to be encouraging business. So I, for one, will say that I'm quite happy to go for approval for it.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question on the 77 children that will be permitted. Will this be staggered? Will they, you won't have 77 children in the place at once, which is what is normally happens with nurseries, that they're staggered. You have some in the morning, some in the afternoon, etc., because it depends on what the funding is as well for the parents. It's not as if there's going to be a massive number of children all at once. And as far as I can see, that nurseries, non schools should be in residential areas. It's not appropriate for them to be anywhere else. And from what I can see and from what we've been told, that this is a well-run nursery. Obviously gets inspected by Ofsted because it has to be. There are no complaints there, so I would support the recommendations in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Mears.
A couple of questions to do with what the area is details. Moving it from 50 children to 77 children is a 50% increase in the number of children there. with regard to that, there's going to be parents in cars. There's no provision for any extra parking. How many of the parking spaces are taken up by staff?
Okay.
Okay.
In other spheres, there's legislation on the ratio of teachers to children and, you know, sort of tutors to students, that sort of thing. What legislation is there that we may, where I'm going with this, is that we may be considering allowing this application to go through, but not be aware that we're allowing something that can't be allowed if we don't know if there's any regulations regarding the ratio of
Definitely regulation in relation to staffing ratios. It has recently changed, so they get more kids in, but that's by the by.
by the perimeter fencing. I appreciate it needs to be acoustic, but 1.8 metres high, I believe that's higher than is normally allowed for fencing in domestic environments.
No, it's
Bang on.
it's bang on.
On the
2 meters is actually what our permitted development allowances say that a standard garden. 1.8 is like a standard fence panel, basically.
With regards to the opening times, will those remain as they are? Then not going to be extended?
Conditions.
Sorry. And with regard to moving the air conditioning units down to ground level, I appreciate they are to a low noise standard and there is acoustic fencing, but the noise has been highlighted as a problem. Could we consider asking for an acoustic canopy to go over the units themselves alongside the fencing so that the units are within a contained enclosure as well as having the acoustic fencing if everything is going to come down to ground level because noise travels horizontally?
Okay.
That's everything.
Oh, sorry, I'm scribbling these down. So just going back to the occupancy, the last planning application was assessed on the basis of 50 children being present in the nursery. We now know that the nursery has been operating above that, but we didn't control that in planning. However, the staff to children ratios and etc. is governed by Ofsted, so that's outside of planning anyway. So we might put a bunch of conditions on, but I'm sure there'll be lots of other legislation outside of planning that they still have to adhere to, including fire and so on. In terms of 77, we now know we have this figure of 77, and that's been fully accounted for within the submissions, and that's been assessed by our environmental health team and the highways team. In terms of cars and staff parking, our guidelines basically set out a requirement and this complies with that requirement. So the requirement set out in the back of the Sustainable Design SPD, the parking standards. So it complies with that. I've written down regulations. I think that's me saying that regulations will cover staff ratios, how many children they can have at the same time. I think Councillor Evans made a point well made there. Although we're conditioning a capacity of 77, the likelihood of 77 children being on site at any one time is relatively low because of the way our nurseries operate. And we've also retained, last time we put a condition on that only 30 children could be outside at any one time playing, and we've retained that condition. So that would be exactly the same. There'd be more, might be more children in the building, but outside there will be. In terms of an acoustic canopy, that doesn't form part of this application. However, we have got a noise report that has been agreed with our noise expert that says that that's not actually required as long as we have this acoustic fencing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallens?
I didn't have a question now.
Oh. Councillor Salter?
Thank you, it's just clarification on the number 77. Is that the permitted number of attendees in the day, or is that the maximum goal?
I'm not sure. I mean, my reading of this is the capacity is it's 77 at any one time, and you may have 120 children in the tent because some come on Tuesdays, some come on Fridays, and
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So the actual intake will be greater. I know I'm not allowed to ask any more questions, but if someone can nod.
Yeah, correct.
So it's 77 maximum children per day, even if there's 500 on the books.
Yeah. Councillor Hughes?
I was just going to say that it's nursery clearly performs a useful function for its community and wider field. And I was going to make the point about the noise. That they've got to demonstrate that it's not too noisy. Seems to me that we don't need to ask for any additional conditions, and that perhaps we should just vote on it, given as the Powell proposed right.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak at the moment? I was going to have a go. Go on.
Just a quick one. When it comes to noise pollution, I mean, to some extent, yeah, I mean, babies, toddlers and that cry and just do your head in. But to be fair, comparing that to train noise, because it's obviously right next to a train track, is quite insufficient.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree?
I would say it's not a heavily used train track, probably. It's not a, not
Carry the nuclear waste.
yeah, it's not, but trains are a lot more noisy. But like I say, the noise assessment has been bolstered to include sensitive receptors, which are basically the neighbouring properties there.
Yeah. I've got two questions. One is a legal question. Can we condition operational matters at a children's home? Is that a planning consideration?
No, it's not. No, you can't replicate statutory regulations or requirements that are controlled elsewhere. So, so for example, if it's regulated by particular legislation requiring how many children can be there at a particular time, how many staff, you can't replicate that in planning conditions.
So the 77 is a number we've been given as an operating number, but it's not something we can condition.
Well, I think there is a condition there to say how
I
many.
accept there's a condition there, but can we legally condition it?
Well, I think in the nursery, I mean, that's fine, that condition. But when we're talking about staffing levels, I think that's the point that some of the council were making, that ratio of staff to children.
Right,
that's
it was the number of children that I
Yeah,
wanted with.
okay.
So, okay, the condition's fine. The other one was, there was reference made to, I think we've got a condition for the air conditioning system, which is between certain times, and that's every day. And it was mentioned in what Ruth put forward, that it's weekdays only. Is that something we can add as a condition? Would that create a problem? I appreciate that there may be open days on a Saturday twice a year or something to encourage more people, but is that something we could add to the condition?
If members feel it's reasonable, it's a necessity to do that. I mean, in terms of what we've got, it's they'll only be used between 7 and 7 o'clock at night, and that applies to a Saturday, a Sunday, a Monday.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just thinking of weekend use of garden areas, what have you. If there is no need for those to be on, is it worth adding that as an additional?
We can if members are happy. I'm just looking at Chris, so we need to vote. So the vote.
If you're actually wishing to, we would need
to mention.
Well, it's not that you want to add a condition, and therefore you need really committee's agreement to do that, because that's what you're going to be voting on eventually when you vote. If you decide to vote approval with conditions, it'll be with an extra condition.
In that case, I'm going to allow myself to recommend that we add to the condition.
We amend the conditions.
We amend the condition to include weekends as well.
I reckon that's it.
I've got a seconder from Councillor Salter. All those in favour of amending?
Can I just clarify what we're amending weekends to? Because currently it's 7 till 7 o'clock on any day. So do you want?
Not on?
Not on at all.
But it's not in use.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe I heard correctly with the presentation. It would be till 6 in the evening or 7. So
that's what time the children are collected. So presumably there's still tidy up time and.
So condition 6 would be amended to the air conditioning units hereby approved shall only be operated between the hours of 7 and 7 in the morning, 7 at night, Monday to Friday.
Okay, all those in favour? Against? Any abstentions?
That's carried.
Okay, moving on to the proposal now then. We've had it proposed, in fact, have we had anybody second it?
Yes, I believe councillor Evans seconded.
I did.
Okay, sorry. Proposed by councillor Powell and seconded by councillor Evans. We move to the motion to approve this with the condition just voted on. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Anyone get? No one against. Okay, thank you, Roger. Thank you very much to the speakers. Appreciate it. Go back to the second application in your papers. Yeah. Which point? I'll pass across to councillor Cross.
I remember to come.
Yeah. Bring some coffee back with you.
Bring some chips in if you like.
We'll try.
Yeah, okay. Okay, everybody, let's move on. Application number 25/00533/FULM. Lichfield Cricket and Hockey Club, Eastern Avenue, Lichfield. This is a variation of condition 2 planning permission to allow the addition of a bowling green alongside the car park extension. Who would like to start on this one?
You wish the presentation from the office.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry. Yeah, presentation from the officer. Is the officer with us, still with us?
Still here.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you'd gone. Carry on, officer, please.
Here we go. So this is Lichfield. It's actually called Lichfield Sports Club. It's been renamed, but I think the original application that we are seeking to amend tonight was called Lichfield Cricket and Hockey Club. So just to clarify that name, and also the site is currently grassland or farmer's field. So this is the site. It's just to the north of Eastern Avenue, the top of Lichfield, and there's quite a lot of there's a sports club sort of building, and then there's lots of hockey pitches and so on that are actually to the south of that red line. This application, this consent, this red line here relates to the 2015 application where we approved 2 football pitches, extra car parking and 1 extra hockey pitch for the club. And since then, the cricket nets have also been relocated into this area as well to allow for an extension building, which is, I think, underway at the moment. So that's the general site area there. We're in Greenbelt as well. There's some pictures of the site as it is today. So in terms of that 2015 consent, they did implement it by extending the car park, which if any of you have been up there, the car park's pretty set out behind the building there, sort of in the box behind where it says number 1 on the screen there. That's where the car park is. So that consent is a live extant consent. So although they haven't installed the football pitches yet, it is something they can do. This plan shows where the bowling green would go, and it would be, oh, I've gone too far. It would be popped in just to the north of the car park, so I can't get my mouse onto it. You can see it just to the north of the car park there. So my mouse isn't going to work. In order to get the bowling green there, it has meant that the football pitch to the north has moved slightly further to the north, effectively, to squeeze it in there. So, in effect, the application seeks to add a bowling green to a previous consent. In principle, it's a much needed facility in the area. A playing pitch and outdoor play area strategy that was published a few weeks ago pointed out that we effectively have a population in Lichfield that would support this. In terms of green belt, it complies with the green belt policies. No grey belt involved here, you'd be glad to know. It says there is a clause in the NPPF that talks about provision of outdoor sport. We've got no buildings being created. It is effectively just a bowling. Design wise, it's appropriate in its context. In terms of neighbours, it's quite the quiet nature of the sport. No external lighting proposed, not like the paddle tennis. Yeah, there's no external lighting proposed. There is already floodlighting approved under the host consent to serve the football pitches and the hockey pitch. To let you know, there is lighting approved on there, but there's no actual additional lighting, and that is covered by the conditions. Parking, there's lots of it on site because they extended that parking area. And there's a traffic management plan that's also attached to the host consent, which is if they ever have any events and things like that going on, they manage the traffic well. So that's the parking and highways impacts, no problems there. And then in terms of landscaping and trees, there is a tree protection condition that we've put on, but there are no trees actually affected by the location of the bowling green, and there are no protected trees on site. So in them terms, it seemed to be acceptable. We've also added in a little biodiversity enhancement, so we get some more bat and bird boxes. So that concludes the presentation. Recommendation is to approve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashton.
I'd just like to say that Bowling Green is in a sports facility. Seems a natural extension of facilities. I recommend approval. And I propose approval.
Have a second of that?
Happy to take that, Chair.
Mr Evans has got that.
Mr Evans.
Thank you. Yes, I think that this is important development. I think it's good for, as we've been told, people's health. It is a good facility, and I was going to move approval, but I'll second approval because I think that these kind of facilities are necessary, and it is something that is needed within Lichfield.
Yeah. Councillor Mears.
Before I start, I'm going to say that I wholly support all forms of sport. As a sportswoman myself, I wax lyrical about the benefits. I played hockey at Lichfield Hockey Club, and my children have played hockey there. The drawings that we're being shown don't represent what's on site currently. The building has almost doubled in size, and they used part of the building for doing events. The plan is that events can carry on while sports competitions carry on. Yes, the car parking has been extended because the club was at capacity before they doubled the size of the building. So the plan to put the extra hockey pitch in has always been there. The car park is also painted up to be tennis courts. Now, I don't know how anyone can play tennis when there's cars parked on it, how anyone can turn up to play tennis if there's nowhere to park the car. And you've got cricket tournaments going on and hockey tournaments. There isn't enough parking. And now they've doubled the size of the building to facilitate events, birthdays, christenings, different kinds of things going on in there as well. When they build the football pitches, they're going to need the space where they want to put a bowling green to put parking. It's natural to extend the parking adjacent to the parking that's already there. So on top of that, there's nowhere for the machinery to be stored that will be need to maintain the bowling pitch. And it's a little bit high in the sky and hopeful when you take into account the plans that are already underway on the previous planning application.
Just to clarify, the building is being extended, and that's in connection. That's not in connection with a commercial use, like for parties and so on. It's in connection with a charity, which name is escaping me. Liberty Jamboree, who will use and they will use that facility. That building was being funded by them as well, basically. The clubhouse, I think they have made quite a lot of the clubhouse recently, and they do have events there. They do have an event management plan that is attached to the host consent. You are right, and it doesn't look like that at the moment because they haven't implemented the 3 pitches that are around the bowling green. They're not there yet. But yeah, quite rightly, that's what you're looking at. The bowling green would be put in amongst, like, with them. Tennis courts, I'm not sure where tennis courts are because I can't see any tennis courts on them.
Yeah, they're painted out on the car park. Now, this is an England Talent Centre.
Yeah.
So they have to have the parking when they're hosting bigger hockey events. And if that space is taken up, well, you're jeopardising their capacity to remain a talent centre if they don't have the right facilities.
So the application has come forward from them, and we haven't got any objections from the Highway Authority.
I don't think there's an issue with traffic going in and out of the site, but I don't think the site has got capacity to host all the different facets and sports that it wants to be known for. And the bowling is outside of the mainstay, which is cricket, hockey, and soon to be football.
I just wonder if this is a sort of appropriate discussion of this application, which we surely have.
The application before you this evening is a bowling green, so.
Sorry for the management, prior management of the organisation.
Okay, well, I think you made your point. Have you got anything to add to that? Anybody else like to make a point? Okay, shall we go to the vote? We've got a proposer and we've got a seconder. You're proposing to approve.
So currently, Vice Chair, I've got Councillor Salter, I think, has proposed. I've definitely got Councillor Evans.
I propose.
Sorry. Sorry. Yes, I have got that.
Councillor Ashton, will you second him?
I proposed.
Oh, you.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
okay. So we've got a proposal from Councillor Ashton and a second from Councillor Evans. So those in favour, please. Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? That's carried. Approved. Thank you. Shall we get our chairman back? He's going to bring us some coffee.
Drive home.
Bring back a bag of chips.
Not too onerous, I hope. Anyway, someone tell me.
Yeah, we refused it, so that one.
Yeah. Right. Moving on to the last application for this evening. This is application 2500 579 FUL, and this is the golf course at Beacon Park. That's the first phase.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the golf course at Beacon Park, application reference 25/00579/FUL. The application is for the reconfiguration of the 18-hole golf course into a new 9-hole pitch and putt course, creation of new pathways and associated works with that. It is being brought to committee because it is a Lichfield District Council application and for no other reason. The site is wholly located within Beacon Park, which is Grade 2 registered park and garden. The red line plan there is the location plan for the site. It's also within green belt, however, it is not considered inappropriate development within the green belt. The works include removal of 9 of the 18 holes, installation of new pathways, and just to clarify, there will be no new structural buildings at all. As you can see there, the southern half of the site is under consideration, I think that's the best way to put that at the moment, but that is the southern part is the bit that floods the most as well, so it's thought that if we bring the holes up to the northern part of the site, then that should stop with that any of those issues. The access is remaining the same. It's not anticipated the proposal will increase traffic or any highway safety issues. It's not thought that there will be any further impact on nearby residents. Obviously golf's a quiet sport, and again, as Kerry said in her previous application, there's no floodlights, anything like that proposed. The development will not have a harmful further impact on flooding, as mentioned, and materials proposed for the footpaths are made using sustainable materials. I know there was some talk about what resin is. It's basically small bits of stone which are basically glued in with that, but they'll also have drainage points as well. There are no objections from the tree officer or the ecologist, and therefore I'm recommending this application for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallens.
Yeah, I'm happy with what you've shown me so far. Let's propose as a first. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton.
I'll just comment that the Friends of Lichfield Historic Parks are very happy with this idea, especially happy with the idea that the unused 9 holes are going to become a nature reserve under the control of LWN.
Anybody else? Anyone wishing to second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Any other comments from anybody, please? Okay.
Positive improvement.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we need to be quick.
Played around with it.
Okay, we'll come to the vote then. We're voting for the officer's recommendation to approve this 18 holes becoming 9 holes. So all those in favour, please. No one against? Okay, we now have the confidential section. We have the confidential section now that, as publicity will be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which would involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as detailed in paragraph 4 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972.